Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and uncover the incredible and honestly kind of weird journey of how an AI creates an image. And believe me, it starts in a place you would never, ever expect.
So we've all seen these amazing, mind-blowing images that AI can just spit out in seconds. But have you ever really stopped and wondered, how does that actually work? How does it get from a few words to, well, to that?
Because, and this is the crazy part, every single AI image, doesn't matter how gorgeous or complex, it begins its life just like this, as a field of total, meaningless, random static. It's pure statistical noise. So the real question is, how on earth do you get structure from complete and utter disorder?
All right, let's dive right in. To really get how this magic trick works, first, you gotta understand where it's all happening. And spoiler alert, it's not on some digital canvas like a painter would use. See, the AI isn't thinking in pixels. No, it's operating in this super compressed, abstract world called the latent space. The best way to think of it is like a mathematical blueprint. It's a world of pure concepts and relationships, not color and light. So, the AI's got its field of noise, and it's inside this conceptual space. What's next? How does it start to wrangle that chaos into something that makes sense? Well, this is where the real work begins.
And here is the most important thing to understand. The model is not adding paint to a canvas. It's not painting at all. Instead, it's doing something called reverse diffusion, and that name is everything. The AI is carefully and methodically removing the noise to find the picture that's hiding underneath. This is the perfect way to visualize it. Just imagine a beautiful statue that's completely buried inside a giant block of stone and sand. The AI's job is to be the sculptor, patiently chipping away, brushing away all that noise, to slowly reveal the shape that's been hiding in there the whole time.
And that sculpting, well, it happens in stages. It's not all at once. First, the AI removes huge chunks of noise just to find the basic shapes, the overall composition. Then it starts refining the bigger forms, the main subject, the shadows. And only at the very, very end does it get to work polishing those tiny little details, like the texture on a piece of fabric or the sharp edge of a building.
But this whole sculptor idea brings up a pretty big question, right? How does the sculptor know what it's supposed to be carving? If it's just removing random noise, how does it end up with a cat instead of a spaceship? That is where your text prompt comes in. The words you type, like a majestic lion at sunrise, they don't tell the AI what to draw. Instead, they act like a semantic compass. They give the AI a destination, a target, and they steer that whole denoising process along the right path through all that chaos.
In this slide, this is really the brains of the whole operation. At every single step of the way, this correction engine is analyzing the image. It predicts the exact pattern of noise it needs to remove next. It's separating the signal, the good stuff, from the static, the junk, all to get just a little bit closer to what your prompt asked for. Okay. But here's where things get really interesting, because you actually get to play director. You can control how strictly the AI has to follow the instructions from that compass. You get to decide the balance between obedience and, well, its own creative freedom.
And you do this with a setting you've probably seen a million times, the classifier-free guidance scale, or just CFG. Just think of it like a knob that you can turn up or down to control how much the AI listens to you versus how much it just improvises.
So if you crank up the CFG, you're putting the AI on a really tight leash. The results are going to be super literal, and they'll stick very, very closely to your prompt. But if you turn it down, you give the AI a free run. It can be way more interpretive, more abstract, and a lot of times, a lot more artistic.
So what about something really complex, like asking for a specific artistic style, or, say, putting your own face into an image? I mean, this is where the intelligence of these models is it's incredible.
When you ask for a style, like in the style of Van Gogh, you're not just slapping a filter on top at the end. Not at all. You are fundamentally changing the physics of the image's world right from the very beginning. The AI builds the entire image using Van Gogh's rules for how light works, how color works, and how lines should look.
And to make sure a person still looks like them, even in a different style, the model first figures out what's called an identity blueprint. This is the core, unchangeable stuff about their face, the bone structure, the proportions, basically all the things that make you look like you.
So that blueprint, it gets locked in place. It's the anchor. And then the new style, whether it's an anime character or a clay sculpture, gets carefully mapped around that unchangeable structure.
And that's how it makes sure a person's identity is perfectly preserved. It's brilliant.
So after all of these insane steps, the sculpting, the guiding, the styling, all happening in that weird, abstract latent space, how do we finally get to see the thing? How does it become a picture?
Well, that's the job of one last piece of the puzzle, the decoder. It's basically a powerful translator. It takes that finished mathematical blueprint from the latent space and turns it into the full-resolution grid of pixels that you actually see on your screen.
And get this is absolutely wild. All of that complicated, conceptual heavy lifting happens on a blueprint that can be 48 times smaller than the final image. That massive compression is the secret to why these models are so incredibly efficient and just so mind-bogglingly fast.
So when you step back and you look at this whole journey from a sea of random static all the way to a polished piece of art, what's the big takeaway? What does it all really mean?
It all comes down to this one powerful idea. An AI image isn't being painted or drawn from scratch. It's not being created in the way we usually think about it. It's actually being revealed. In a weird statistical sense, that final image you see, it was always hidden somewhere inside that initial field of random noise. It was just one of an infinite number of possibilities, just sitting there waiting for your specific words, your prompt, to be the key that guides the process and brings that one specific masterpiece out of the chaos and into the light.